Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. Today on the podcast, we've got an amazing runner with an amazing career on the road and on the track. I'll just spit out some things. Hopefully I'll get them all right. State record holder, state champion in cross country and track, record holder, All American at Michigan State, national champion, national record holder, world record holder, and on the road in the half marathon, lots of other stuff, world scorer at the World Cross Country Championship. And today, welcome on the podcast, Herb Lindsay.
Thank you. It's fun sharing these stories. I don't get a chance to do it very often anymore.
These are great stories. Let's go to money, because that's just a significant thing of the decade and of the times. The Cascade Runoff is a famous race where the thing was, you've won the race twice. What was going on among the athletes as it percolated up of things have to change? What was going on?
Yeah. I talked already about the Diet Pepsi National Championship and how I was able to get there by contacting the meet director, the elite runner coordinator. And that kind of led to me getting my first contract with Nike. Nike gave you a retainer, a fee. At that time, it was $25,000, which for me at that time was a lot of money. It was more than they were paying the Michigan State cross country coach at the time, which amazes me to think that where coaches are paid now. Nike at that time paid the $25,000. You choose where you want to go. You choose the race. We'll fly you there. Also equipment and health benefits, health insurance. That was a big concern. Put all that together, and that was an attractive package. Then I said, I want to go to that race that you've been putting on, this new race in Portland. That's when I was still teaching school. So I flew in on Friday night, went to the hotel, was welcomed at the hotel with a gift package, fruit and wine, Emmett Valley wine, and now I've never been treated like this. And I ran the race, knew the course, ran the race, used my strategy, used all the skills I could to defeat the guy from Japan, who was the sister city thing that they did with Portland. I can't remember the man's name, but he was the top ranked 5,000, 10,000 meter runner in Japan at the time. But that kind of opened my eyes to say that here, these elite runners are coming and the money's there, but it's just under the table. I guess I was hungry to see more openness, to see the money being more available. In hindsight, I shouldn't have been complaining, because that 2 or 3 year period where I was running well, I was getting the money, but the money was coming in the form of appearance fees, speaking fees that came under the table. But it was nice to have that money, and I was anxious to run another race. That was part of the motivation to keep going and run another race like a kid in the candy store. I'll have some of that. I'll have some of that. Oh, I want some of that. Oh, yeah, I'd like to do that. And without anyone to kind of rein me in and say, whoa, yeah, not so much, not so fast, you got to. Frank Schroeder was trying to guide me to say, you can't run that much. You got to have some time to recover. You got to have time to rest. You have to you need to feel stress will catch up to you in time. But the money was there. There was a group of athletes who were saying, gee, I want some of that. How do we get the corporate money was there? The running boom was booming, and apparel manufacturers, marketers, and footwear manufacturers, coffee, drinks, alcoholic beverages, all of these companies were moving the money. And why does that now come to the runners who are performing the show? That was the idea. So little by little, we organized. There was this group that was formed with business runners, and we had meetings. There was a man from Portland who was a lawyer who helped guide, and there was a couple of athletes who were trained in the law. They helped organizing some of the things. Craig Mossback, who became part of the new Athletics Congress, say track and field for a few years and help guide and direction of the track. But it came down to Nike pushing the issue by providing the cash prize to the Cascade Runoff, which was a Nike race. It was right in their backyard. The organizing group accepted the money from Nike. Athletes were brought in, and we were going to openly accept these cash prizes. I ran a good race, but I made a mistake coming home. I waited for my break point, and my competitor, Greg Meyer, the West Michigan guy that I raced on so many times from the early age of 14, he jumped a little faster than me, gapped me, and then I was going the same speed. But I came second. He came first. It was $10,000 for him and $6,000 for me. And I think it went to 4 and then 3 or 2. I can't remember but it was top 10. That was basically the game changer. That race set up a scenario where the Athletics Congress, which was having answer to the USOC and the International Amateur Athletic Federation, to say, okay, you've got to enforce the rules, and the rules are you can't accept cash prizes. All of the athletes who accepted cash prizes received letters to say, you got to come and defend yourself, explain yourself. And everyone ignored those requests to come to a hearing. They were basically going to try to press the issue as much as they could. I say this with in a respectful way, but I was not in control of my own destiny at that point because I deferred to my mentor and mentors, Frank Shorter, who has a law degree, along with his friend and lawyer in Boulder. He became a surrogate. I became Frank's surrogate. They had the plan. It wasn't my plan so much as they said, here's what we would propose, Herb, that we do. I bought in to say, okay, we'll go to this hearing and we'll propose something that will be a starting place for the International Amateur Athletic Federation and the IOC to adopt changes in rules that allow for the distribution of funds openly to elite athletes. We were talking about distance running, but it really became not just distance running, but everything else. The dream team in Barcelona that played basketball would not have happened if it hadn't been for that Cascade Runoff and that opening of cash prizes. It would have happened eventually, some way, somehow, but how long it would have happened, maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years later, I don't know. But basically, my lawyers, Frank Shorter and business partners from Boulder, put together the plan. It was called the Herb Lindsay Amateur Trust. We met with Olin Castle in a hotel at O'Hare Airport, ordered 3 beers and sat there and talked about it. St. Pauli girls, I remember. And it was what do you plan? What are you planning to do? He basically wanted to get the heads up on what was going to happen. So we basically, Mike O'Lear, laid out the whole plan. Herb Lindsay Amateur Trust. And then there was a hearing. There was somebody typing and all the words are recorded. So that's in the record somewhere. But it was like being in court. It was like, okay, take the money. Okay. And then put it into a trust fund. And then based on IRS figures, how much does it cost for a person my age, married, no kids, this overhead? How much does it cost? So what's the cost of living? And then you could make withdrawals from that those cash prizes in that trust fund to pay for and support yourself as you continue your athletic career. That was palatable. That was an acceptable first step. So it became the Herb Lindsay Amateur Trust, and then it became the TAC Trust. There were financial institutions led by Bank of Boulder, a guy named Steve Bosley, who was one of the partners with Frank in Boulder that hatched this idea. That's how they became the holders of the money for all of the elite athletes. So they would distribute the money based on getting these requests to withdraw the money. That's how it went. Yeah. And the people who also were in that race with me, they scoffed at me thinking, oh, geez, you sold out to the devil. I said, I followed the lead of someone who was smarter than me, and I went along with the idea. Yeah, looking back on it now, why did I do it? Because other people encouraged me to do it that way. I could have easily not done it that way. It would have actually extended my income because I was already receiving more money under the table. Once it goes above the table, now it's just cash prizes. You got to show up in the race for it. Now, rather than receiving $2,500 under the table to show up and race, whether you win or not, now you have to, that cash prizes go into this.
Yeah. And pay your tax and pay some more taxes. Yeah.
Yeah. And I learned about in estimated tax, paying estimated taxes, and I needed to have someone guiding me on how to invest better than I did at that time. But looking back on that, yeah. If I have a regret, one of the biggest regrets I have is I went to a race, and I can't remember. I could figure it out if I went back through my log books. I went and ran a race, and I brought back a $5,000 check. And this is when the money was under the table, but I had a $5,000 check, and I won this race. And I came to a friend's house in my neighborhood in Boulder, and he was another guy that I came to know in Lansing. He went through high school with my wife. He worked for an investment company in Boulder, downtown mall, and they specialized in penny stock. And he had been charting when Nike stock was going to go public. And so he said, Herb, that Nike stock's going to go public on Wednesday of this week. And I was showing off my $5,000 check. I was so proud of myself. He said, give me that $5,000 check and let me put it in to this penny stock. And I had ideas of buying a better car that I could go into the mountains with. And in my mind had already thought how I was going to spend that money. And he said, he was badgering me all night long. And then finally said, $500, give me $500 of it, Herb, and let me buy the penny stock for you. You won't regret it. You won't regret it. He said, biggest mistake ever made. Didn't do it. If it had been the 5,000, he said, I would have been one of the highest stock with all the divisions in Nike stock over the years. Oh,
wow.
geez. I could have been a multimillionaire. Based on if I'd made that $5,000 investment in penny stock, how much it would be worth. I remember sharing this story with Phil Knight, and he said, yeah, Herb, you made a big mistake.
That's crazy. The distribution of the money, the draws from the Boulder Bank through the trusts, it was set up and then used, and certainly some people took advantage of it and used the money. Did you feel in your interactions, was it policed very closely, or just saying, just here it is?
Yeah, the Bank of Boulder oversaw and the accounting, and they are the people that reported back as to how much they had the figures of how much you could legitimately, legally, by the rules as they were written based on this Herb Lindsay or tax trust. They had the rules about how some of the money was still there just 2 or 3 years ago. Someone from Europe said, oh, yeah, they had their money held there. And so the last of the money I heard from talking to someone that it was finally, that last account was finally closed out all these years later. Just a few years ago, someone had their money there and it had been earning a little bit of money. It was set up so it earned like still 2.5%, 3%, guaranteed 2 or 3%. So it wasn't a bad investment just to have your money held there because of the deal that the bank president gave at the time.
Let me ask one more thing about running, which was, you mentioned the misnomer on the plaque, the Olympic trials.
Yeah. I was always focused on the Olympic from the time I was maybe a 14 or 15-year-old. I always aspired to make that step to the next level. I was just always hungry. And from the time I was a young boy, I just wanted to show what I could do. I wanted to have an opportunity to perform. I wanted to compete. I wanted to show how determined I could be. The Olympics, I was hauling canoes still in 1976, 1972, 1976, when other people were running internationally. And when I saw that Craig Virgin had run in the World Cross Country Championships or run in the junior as a junior against the USSR, I wanted to be able to do that. And I ran that race with Jimmy Carter.
Right,
Yeah,
the famous end, the end of his career, kind of.
yeah, and I thought about it recently as he's passed. I brought out those old pictures from that race and I remembered it. But Jimmy decided that we weren't going to have an Olympics based on what was happening geopolitically. So the Soviets had gone into Afghanistan and they were fighting the Taliban, and the U.S. was supplying weapons to the Taliban. And, Jimmy Carter said, no, that's not acceptable. So no Moscow Olympics for us. I still went to the Olympic trials. We warmed up and were ready to run the trial heats for the 10,000, and they canceled the trial races. They said, we'll just go to the final. We'll just go to the final because there have been so many scratches. So they went right to the final. And so I went out and trained a little bit with a long freeze trail that day instead of going and running a 10,000 meter qualifying race. I went right to the final. It was a rainy night. I had thought through this scenario. I said, am I going to just try to make the team, or am I going to try to win? There is going to be no travel to Moscow. There's going to be no Olympics. So you might get a chance to go and meet the president and the White House as a member of the team that does not go anywhere, that does not compete anywhere. So I decided I'm going to just run to win. And I was familiar with my competitor, the man who was clearly the favorite. No one was thinking they could beat this person except me. At least in my mind, I was thinking I could beat the man that day, Craig Virgin. When the race started, we kind of settled in, but when Craig made the break, I looked around and I said, is anyone else going to try to race with this guy? I asked the question. Like Alberto Salazar kind of like ignored and Greg Fredericks, like, hell no. Greg Fredericks said, I went with him. And I was accustomed to doing this. My coach at Michigan State encouraged me to race this guy and try to win. I ran in the national or the Big Ten cross country championships once in Madison, Wisconsin. Faltering, coming. I tried to match his pace and he would hammer on me and I'd catch up, and he'd hammer on me and he'd catch up, and he'd hammer on me and I'd catch up. And finally I got into oxygen debt, and it's like that suffering line to the finish line with people catching me. And yeah, I already had experience with racing against Craig and knowing his strategies, and he was a tactician and he trained his body to be able to handle these fast changes. He had a more international competition, and the international competition, you got to be able to drop that kind of all out big pace change in the middle of the race and do it repeatedly and recover and do it again and recover and do it again and recover. And he was better prepared than that than me. It was a crazy race, and Craig counts it as one of the top races, 5 races of his entire career. And he brings it right up there with World Cross Country Championship as one of his most determined and competitive efforts. Because I was a determined competitor that day. There was one point where he actually stopped on the home stretch, and it was something he already done to me before. And I chose to stop behind him. You ever seen anyone stop in a race? Yeah, he stopped. But the same thing had happened to him with one of the Soviet runners that he was trailing, stopped. His coach called him to pull off in the lane 2 and stop, and Craig took the lead. The Soviet runner pulled it behind him. The Soviet runner went on to then blast away from him and win. But Craig used that strategy on me in college. And here he was at the Olympic trials, and he did it again. But I got into oxygen debt. Like Jimmy Carter did in that race at Catoctin Mountain Park. I got into oxygen debt. When you're into oxygen debt, you've got to slow down. You got to slow down and let that balance of the gases in your system recover. I did, but I lost a bunch of places. I still came back at the end of that race and ran sub 2 minutes for the last 800 meters. So it wasn't like I was jogging home, but a 28:30 something to finish 8th or 9th. I can't remember what it was, but one of the training partners from Boulder came by me. I was like, first time Mike Buman had ever beaten me, but Mike Buman does not beat me. He did that day. That was one. my first Olympic try, and I went away to this rose garden away from campus there, and I remember actually sobbing. I was so disappointed. In retrospect, could I have run and finished second or third? Absolutely. I could have easily finished second place in that race. I was better trained and more suited to race than the other two finishers. Most people can't tell you who finished second or third. I know who they are. You probably recognize their names. But then in 1984, it was a different situation, but I was super fit, super strong, super confident. I ran the qualifying race and I ran 28:20, something like that, to qualify. But it was a race where I was in the pack, running in the pack. There's a lot of this starting and slowing down and having to adjust. I was running right behind the Brigham Young guy, Ed Eyestone. And Ed's feet had a crazy leg kick when he came up. His feet came out to the side as he raced. And I was like putting the brakes on. To train for that race that year, I trained with Frank Shorter exclusively on a surveyed grass track around an athletic field around a soccer field at a Burbank Elementary or Burbank Middle School in Boulder. So I was raining on a soft surface, no tartan surface. So I was putting the brakes on all the time. And I got a big blister on the ball of my right foot, blister under the thick pad of skin. And it was burning. I went to see the trainer. I knew exactly what was happening. I had this kind of thing before by racing indoors on indoor tracks, especially where you're racing and there's a lot of tension on that part of your foot inside. The foot slides a little bit inside the shoe, causes the pain, the heat and the friction. So I met with the trainer and we drained the fluid off, and then I was putting a second skin treatment on there and taping it in position and training on it and seeing how it felt. It took a little bit of adjustment to get that tape job in the second skin material, this kind of snot between cellophane kind of thing that would go. It was going to save me. It was going to protect that foot and allow me to race without getting this re-injury and without getting the heat to that thing. And I planned to meet the trainer at this training room at the set time. I went there right before my race. That training room was shut down for the day because ours was the last competition of the day. And the only training room was open that was over here at the stadium. So I went over there, the trainer that I had worked with all week to get this tape system down, he didn't show. Instead, he had gone to a party of all of the athletic trainers that were working the meet. They had a party and he went to the party. He was drinking beer with friends. So my mental preparation, all of the focus of getting everything in place, controlling all the things you can control, getting the tape job. I should not have even put any tape on my foot, but I had someone else work on the tape, but it took me all week to get that tape job just right. That tape job that I got and went into competition with did not work. It actually created more pain, more discomfort. So every time I stepped down after the first mile, it was like I was stepping on a hot stove top. It was hot. I ended up running 28:30 and being way out of it. I just, so frustrating because I had all this fitness that I couldn't use. There's more to the story. I was so disappointed and so depressed. I left the village. Left USC, and my wife and my young child were there to greet me. And we took the train to Southern California and went to visit a friend of ours who lived there now. And I went on a train, even though I qualified for the 5,000, was entered in the 5,000. I left and I was so disappointed. I just left. I didn't have a coach really to say, what's your plan? Blah, blah, blah. There wasn't any kind of discussion like that. I just left town. So we come down to the trials, 5,000, and I'd already gone out and run a long road run with Kirk Pfeffer in the hills around where he lived. And while we were out on this training run, which was a fast 10-mile training run, on the same day as the 5,000 meter trials. I was running up a newly paved section of roadway on a busy roadway, running uphill, and I rolled my ankle on this newly paved area because there was a manhole cover that had not been adjusted. I fell into the lane of traffic, and there was a ready mix truck coming down the highway with tires about this wide. And my head was only about 2 feet from the tires. I fell into the lane of traffic as I stumbled climbing this hill and severely injured my right ankle, severe sprain. So I hobbled home, but icing it. So I get a call from Frank Schurter. Get up here. You got to run the 5,000. Frank, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. I just went on a training run with Kirk and I injured my ankle. There's no way I can make it there, and there's no way I could compete today. No. So that was the last time I talked to Frank about it for many years. I watched the 5,000 meter final, started watching it at a restaurant where they had a bar, and I couldn't finish watching it. Only about a year ago, I finally watched the 5,000 meter Olympic trial final. And I was so disgusted with myself. So many regrets, bigger regrets than not buying that Nike stock even, because I said, there's no way I would have let Don Clary beat me. No, respect to Don. No, I just blew it. It's not having someone there to help me think it through. And Frank was thinking about me, but it was a little too late, and there wasn't anyone there to reassure me after the 10,000. Oh, you still got the 5,000. Let's stay with it. Hang in there. You refocus on the 5,000. Make the team on the 5,000. Yeah, I didn't do that. That's my story of my Olympics. And so, no, I didn't make the Olympic team. Was I good enough to make the Olympic team? Absolutely. Did I make the world cross country? Yeah, I did. I could have done it more if I hadn't had other circumstances that came up. I remember asking Rob DiCastella when I traveled with him, do you consider that I'm world class? And he said, you're silly to be even asking that question. Of course you are. Of course you are. Because I was still having this kind of self-image, like, am I elite? Am I really a world-class athlete, or am I not? Yes, I was. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think anyone who raced against you or was in the era or was a fan of the era has any doubt either. These are just amazing stories of the course through all these experiences. How did things like that inform your coaching approach with athletes?
It was a major influence. I remember going to speak at the Michigan Interscholastic Track Coaches Association meetings. Friends of mine were coaches already. That led to doing coaching clinics in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana as well. One of the topics that I talk about would be mental rehearsals, understanding all that you can control and prepare for and anticipate. I consider it like my secret weapon. And it was all about how you get to think, how you think. A lot of that was all about my development. I started writing mental rehearsal exercises when I was a freshman in high school. I would have someone read it back to me, a classmate, a teammate read it back to me. That was my way of getting my mind ready. And I use that a lot with my athletes. I remember one of my athletes years later told me, you were the first coach that was teaching me how to think. It goes back to my freshman year in high school when I had a teacher coach who shared an Earl Nightingale tape, third generation cassette tape, The Greatest Secret. You can find it on the internet now. What's the problem with man today? He's forgotten how to think. And I sat there in my gym shorts, glad that I didn't have to go out and play football on frosted grass outside. And I didn't want to play flag football. I sat there, everyone else is messing around. Coach goes back to his room. But I listened to that and borrowed the tape and listened to it over and over again. That became a part of me. I taught children how to use mental rehearsals. I would create mental rehearsals, dialogues. Would have mental rehearsal exercises in midweek before the big races to prepare them for what they were going to happen. My elite runners, I returned to teaching and coaching and took over for one of my friends who was retiring, I took over his job as an elementary physical education teacher and coach of track and cross country. I coached the girls cross country state championship team and the individual champion that year. Coached her and helped her win the state championship with the kinds of things I taught her how to do and how to be prepared to do something that other people were not going to be prepared to do and how it would make a difference. And it did. It helped her win the state championship. It helped us win the girls team state championship. Some people rebelled and say, I can't think that way. That's not, that won't, if you don't believe it'll work for you, it won't work for you. But if the mind believes and your body is trained and you're strong and fit, it will make a huge difference for you. Yeah.
Herb, you've done a lot of things that no one else has done. Set a world record. And you've had all these accomplishments at this level, run against the best people in the world, beat the best people in the world. One thing you've done that very few people get to do is get profiled in Sports Illustrated, a magazine that's not just for runners. And we've all had Runners World subscriptions, but Sports Illustrated, what was that experience all about?
It's interesting you asked that because it was a goal of mine to have my picture on the cover of Sports Illustrated, because I don't have it anymore. I don't know how I came to lose it, but what issue it is, I don't know. But there's a cover of Sports Illustrated with Steve Prefontaine wearing Oregon. He made the cover of Sports Illustrated. It's on display in that little pub that they have on the Nike World campus. It's framed as one of the pictures of Sports Illustrated that's in that pub. It's like a pub from Boston that's in Portland or Beaverton. There it is. But it was a story of him as this evolving, emerging distance runner on the scene, and it shaped me. I mean, I want to race against this guy. I want to be as good as him someday. It's like me looking at news from Craig Virgin's running in those days. He was already at a level way above where I had achieved. I wanted to achieve that. So I never made the cover. Secretariat, a horse was on the one cover that I was featured in. And
the greatest.
Muhammad Ali stings like a bee, floats like a butterfly, stings like a bee. He was on the cover. Yeah, it was Muhammad Ali. Bob, I can't remember the author's name now, but he was on staff as a writer for Sports Illustrated, and that's what I'd have to look back at it.
Yeah,
but he was a motorsports, but he really took an interest. He spent several days in Boulder with us. Then he came to a race. I think it was a race in Salt Lake City, and came and watched me race. And he wrote that article. And I thought he did a pretty good job of writing the article. And yeah, a lot of people read that article now, and they get back in touch with you saying, "Oh, wow, you were Sports Illustrated. You have your." Yeah, that was one of my claims of fame. I had an article written about me, well, a couple of them. But I remember the first time I made Sports Illustrated, that section that they have in the back of the magazine.
Yeah, in the spotlight.
In the spotlight, emerging people. Yeah. That was my first reference there. I had three things: that first reference, and then the article about me, and then the article about the Midland Run where I raced against Lasse. There's a whole nother story with that race too. And I continued to know Lasse over the years because we traveled together and roomed together in travels in South America when we raced down there. Yeah.
Let's bring up the topic of drugs then, because Lasse Viren, his name gets swirled around, and he was coy about blood doping. Personally, I had the impression, like some other people in smaller schools I've talked with, that say, I want everybody to think I'm cheating and I've got superhuman powers. Anything I can do to scare my competitors, let them think what they want. How was traveling with Lasse Viren, and what was the effect on everybody when there was talk of doping?
This was years after the fact now that where I'm traveling with him. He would travel to South America in his competitive years There was a Finnish community in Colombia, and he would travel and be out of the cold for a few months and travel and be in the high country. So he trained at altitude. So he understood the benefits of altitude training. And Frank Shorter knew the benefits of altitude training, and that's what moved him to Boulder, led him to move to Boulder. He was taking advantage of whatever he could at the time. And the blood doping, most of the people that were listening would understand what that means. It's basically adjusting them, putting more blood platelets into but not making it so thick that you got to have the right amount and to reintroduce more blood platelets. And it's a self-limiting thing. I studied this in physiology classes as an undergraduate. I understood the potential pitfalls of doing that, but if you work with a physician over a period of time, you can find that place to do it. And it was suspected that he did. But when I roomed with him, I roomed with him because he said nobody else spoke. He spoke a little bit of English. He spoke way more English than when he would talk. Didn't want to talk to reporters or other people. He would say, "I'm going to English. I only speak Finnish." But he could carry on a conversation with you, and I loved time with him and he guided me and told me things that helped me in my career after that. He basically told me, "Yeah, I took advantage of regulating the amount of red blood cells, and it helped me be prepared to carry oxygen to my muscles." And that's what you need. Yeah, it was something that happened. Now, as far as steroids, and those things were being used by athletes when I was racing. And sure, Frank was very aware. Frank Schroeder was one who was trying to address the issue when he was a competitor. He certainly saw the results where competitors outperformed him and their performances were enhanced by steroid use. You can only recover so fast from the intense workouts that you put yourself through. But if you can shorten that recovery period, you can train. So I don't doubt that it's still going on, that it was going on. I've read the recent books that talk about what happened with our athletes here and some of the coaches here. You're probably already familiar with those things, but Lassie said, no, he did not. He said, he told me at least that blood doping was something he used. He felt that was within the legal sense, but it wasn't. But it was, for him, in his mind, okay. But not everybody had the doctor who would work with them on a long-term basis. The Soviets were certainly doing it. Soviet bloc countries were certainly doing it. And they were also using the enhancing drugs. And they still are, I think.
Yeah. But you were able to stay in the sport, involvement as a coach and speaking. With all this work, the accumulated strength, training, recoveries, how's things for you now? What do you do in terms of exercise and fitness now?
I just talked with Jacqueline Garreau a few days ago. She sent a picture on Facebook of her with her skinny clothes and her skate skis and snow-studded place. I'm not sure where she lives. I think she lives in Quebec, but we talked back and forth. She asked how I was doing, and I shared that knees, they complain, or ankles, they complain, or a foot. I've injured myself in different ways, not always just running-related injuries, but hauling a wheelbarrow loaded with aggregate and rolling my ankle while trying to control a load of wheelbarrow of aggregate, hurting my ankle or my foot. And awkward falls on skis, snowshoes, or snowboard. Yeah, I injured my knees and have had those repaired. I've repaired my shoulders with surgeries from injuries. But I'm still moving. I am more fit than most people my age, and I can still hike, and I don't ski so much, but I snowshoe a lot. I snowshoe almost every day right now because we've got some good snow and I'm enjoying getting into the woods. I will be back on my elliptical and when the snow goes away, because the elliptical movement allows me to get my heart rate up to a good target range and lets me go on 10, 12, 15-mile rides where I feel like I'm an elite runner again, and I would have covered that same path running the whole distance. But now there are some nice trails, the rails trails that allow for you to cruise along. And yeah, I don't really like the sound of the machine working beneath me, but I wear headphones sometimes and I listen to music as I go. But I love the elliptical for that reason.
Yeah, we have that mental shift of we're running and we're running at a certain effort level. The clock is irrelevant at that time if you're enjoying and pushing your body. And I've got an elliptical out in my little garden pod that I use every day. Yeah, it's fun to think about that. Letting go of elite performance and letting go of looking at the clock when we exercise. How does that transition work for you?
It really comes back to where I started. I was that boy who loved to just be outside and to move under my own power and to embrace the natural environment around me. For me, I feel a relationship, and I'm one who celebrates my connection with the natural world and that see myself as being part of the natural world. And so just being a good human animal, a good member of the global community, a part of nature. If I can continue to embrace that, brings me a sense of joy and it brings me satisfaction, a sense of gratitude, and I celebrate my ability to continue to move that way. I like going outside and sharing the experience with others, and I now volunteer as a docent with a nonprofit called the Leelanau Conservancy, and we are preserving landscapes that are adjacent to the Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore here in Northwest Michigan, and making these places accessible to others and sharing them and talking about the wonderful things you can enjoy and connect with there. So letting go, I still enjoy elements of competition, but I haven't competed. I haven't competed for 8 years. My last competition was a memorable one, though. I want to share that it was a highlight. And I share this with people, but they sometimes don't understand the joy I experienced from this. There's this race in Flint, Michigan. It was a race that I ran many times. It started back in the late 1970s by the Speaker of the Michigan House of Representatives. He brought a few runners to Flint, Michigan, and they ran in the heat of day in the middle of August, the Crim Road races. And I ran there and won there and ended up giving money back to the benefactors. It was Special Olympics that got the money. It's all organized differently now, and the cash prizes are there, but appearance fees aren't anymore. But they invited me to come back for the 35th anniversary of the race. I think that was right. And I said, I'll come back and be a part of the press conference and the festivities. But I would like to have you count me on the 5K race. So I'm just going to run the 5K race. And I just count me. It doesn't matter what number I have. So I trained for the 5K race, and I would go out and run 2 or 3 miles 2 or 3 times a week and practice running the telephone poles to get myself up to race pace and to know how that felt, and practicing running in the racing shoes, and did my whole pre-race preparation. And then you feel like you're running again. It's like all of it's like that preset plan, the hardware, the software works through, and it's like your body is responding in the same ways it did when you're an elite competitor. I go to the line and I get up there on the starting line, and I'm looking down the starting line, and how many other world-class runners are there on the line? And I'm looking at myself and I'm looking at others, and I get into the race, and there's someone who's running right with me. They're maxing out their pace. I'm at my pace. They're at their target pace. And I just was impressed. And it was a joy to be able to race with this person right next to me. And we got about 2 miles into the race, and we're side by side, or I'm right behind this person. And then I see this guy just up ahead that looked like he was old and gray like me. And I thought, if I'm going to be in the running for Masters winner, I want to go after that guy. So I tried to push and move. I moved away from this competitor. But I was so impressed with this person. I wanted to find out who it was, and I wanted to compliment them on their race and talk with them about their race. Came to find out that this runner's name is Lucy. And I figured out who her father was, who was an Olympic level triathlete, Ironman kind of competitor. And I've watched this girl rise up through the ranks, and she's become one of the best runners in the state of Michigan over the span of 8 to 10 years. And now she's heading to Michigan State University to run cross country there. This girl, young woman who I just hope she does well. Her body's changing too. She's maturing, but I'm hoping to see her race through our college career at Michigan State University. They'll have a good team. Not quite as good as North Carolina, but South Carolina. Where is Sadie Englehart running next year, and Jesse Jaswinski? Where are they going? Southwest School. That school that's dominated women's distance running recently.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we should look it up.
Yeah, there's a West Michigan girl who is the daughter of a former Michigan track star. She coaches her own children, and they have become elite competitors. Jaswinski is the last name.
That era of, it was the mid 70s, late 70s, Eastern Michigan. Was that when they were very dominant and winning?
Well, Eastern Michigan is Division I, but they had a very experienced coach, was very determined, very competitive, and he recruited a man from Great Britain, Gordon Minty. Gordon was a world-class competitor. And when I came to Michigan State, Eastern Michigan was a top-ranked team. They would do well. They were ranked nationally. Bob Parks, that was his name, Coach Parks. Yeah, we went to Michigan State, went down to Eastern, and we raced a dual beat against them. And Eastern was ranked, and we were not ranked. And Bob Parks and my coach, Jim Gibbard, were kind of friends, but they were adversarial too. They just loved to beat each other. It was a big meetup with these teams, and my coach really wanted to win this meet. And he previewed the competitors, and he said, here's this guy. He's going to take it out. I can tell you, he's going to be the one pushing the pace. And sure enough, their top runner, a man named Tom Hollander, went out and raced. Gordon Minty was injured, so he wasn't able to race that day. But I went out and I was doing everything I could to handle the fast pace. He went out like at 4:20 for the first mile. It was like I'd never gone out at 4:20 for the first mile on a 5 mile or 6 mile cross country course. But he led me off course.
Oh my gosh.
He led me off course on his home course, but it was a course that they only used for training. They hadn't raced on it. So they ran these repeat loops around these athletic fields with these big gates or these big chain link fences between the field lines, and gates opened. But we started the second loop, and we were like, here's the other runners on the other side of a chain link fence, and we've already passed that gate. No, we were like, we're now 300 meters behind everyone. 300 meters behind everyone, because we had got such this big gap to pull away. Tom basically gave up at that point. My coach was saying, yeah, you got to get back in this. You got to get back. So it was one of the most determined races of my entire career at Michigan State, was trying to catch up. We ended up winning by going to the top 3 in a dual meet. And my coach told my teammates to slow down. So the 3 of us, I caught up to them barely. The 3 of us were holding hands, crossing the line together to win and defeat Eastern Michigan. And Bob Parks was so upset. He was fuming. It was like, And my coach was gloating, and it was quite an event. I still have pictures from that race, and it was one of the pictures was featured in the history of MSU, Michigan State University cross country, that was recently compiled a 10-year project by a man from Michigan who now lives in Waterloo, Ontario. And that's where he put his staff and his expertise together to put together this fabulous history book of Michigan State cross country.
Excellent. I heard these stories just keep falling out. But let me just say, it is a pleasure, uplifting to speak with you and hear some of these memories. Your life story is just fun and interesting to go through the ups and the downs and the challenges and your approach and your impact. It's just fantastic to spend time with you, Herb.
Thanks. So it took us a little while to get here, but yeah, I enjoyed it.
Let's do one last thing. Could you go grab your memento with the half marathon
Sure, it's right
plaque,
here.
and let's just put that on the screen here.
Sure.
Oh, it's perfect. There it is. Okay, I have to stop talking so the camera goes back to you, but I'm just going to read it. Yeah, winner Herb Lindsay, 101, 47.0.
Maple Leaf Half Marathon, North Manchester, Vermont. I remember before the race going with the race director, race planner. He was taking me around and showing me the course, and he said, "Oh, let's make a side stop. I just want to make sure that the awards are in process." So we went to this woodworking shop where there's a local company. I think they're still there making these maple butcher blocks. Here's the thing for collecting the liquid if you're cutting meat off. Of course, they don't always to emboss them. I went in there and I saw that they were making these up and getting them all ready to go and everything except this information, right? I saw these before that. I said at the time, my name's going to be on one of those, but I didn't anticipate world record. It lasted about a year. But to think that there are probably 25 guys under an hour last year, but the half marathon was just not typically being run that many times at that time. And now it's more common for international competitors to run half marathons. I wish I could remember the name of the American who just set the new record, and because I just read about it recently.
Nance?
Yeah, I'd have to look back at the internet again.
He finished second at the tape by the lean, but he got the American record.
That's right. I read it. Yeah, that's right. He said I passed him just after the line. Well, This one's been hanging on the wall for a while. It's one of the mementos that I keep. Another one that's up on the wall behind me here is a picture from the East Lansing State Bank race, which was run in East Lansing for a number of years, a fall race. It's one of my favorite pictures. And Steve Flanagan is in there.
Can you twist the camera because it just chops off? I don't. Where's the camera? Oh yeah.
There are a few other mementos that are pictured here. I don't know how much that you can see.
No, that's brilliant. We all used to wear on those short shorts.
I know that a lot of the people that are in this picture, and a story behind all of those people. When people look at the picture, they cannot usually find me, or they misidentify me. They find a man in the middle of the picture that looks like me, a man named Rob Cool. There were parents, Rob and Ron Cool, who went to Michigan State after Grand Rapids Community College and raced at Michigan State very successfully. Big Ten steeplechase champion, Rob was. He's in the middle there. He's taller than me. But he left campus and people would come up to me and say, "Hey, Rob," because we looked enough alike each other. In fact, just recently at a reunion back at Michigan State, somebody thought I was Rob again.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Are you in the white?
No, something I did crazy at the time was wore cotton plaid flannel shirt under a singlet.
Oh my gosh. Oh, there, right next to it. Yes.
Yeah. And Steve Flanagan's in the picture. He was one who helped me become a post-collegiate runner more than any other person because of his experience and knowledge of training. Now, one of the people he taught, his own daughter, is doing that very successfully with athletes in Oregon, and I applaud her work and her efforts, but her father also congratulating him because what she is doing. She learned a lot of that from her own parents, and not just dad, but mom as well. Yeah. That's when Frank Schroeder Sports was just happening, and those shoes that are pictured behind you in that
Yeah.
image were being sold there. We sold our waffle trainers and LDVs.
Thanks for spending all this time with me, Herb. It is great to hear these stories and such important history from your involvement in the trust and your reflections on them these decades later. Very interesting.
There was a team of brothers who were the son of one of the organizers of the Cascade Runoff that came to this house and set up cameras and taped, and they were trying to put together a documentary. Have you heard about this?
I did not know. I heard about that it was going to be done.
Yeah, and I don't know what the status is. I've got their contact information. They traveled to different parts of the country and visited. It was like an extensive road trip. All the video gear and setups, lights, everything. And they
I talked to a couple of the women that took the top couple checks. And I think they might have mentioned that it was being done. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what the status is. They were trying to get it before the World Championship was staged in Eugene. They were trying to get it in the can before that, but they had a lot of editing to do. I think as much work as they put into it, they have to have created something or will create something eventually, but I hope it's before I die.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be a fascinating feature film. If they're going to do it as a documentary, it'd be tougher to do as a feature film. We've got to impersonate all the runners, and anybody who knows running is going to look at the running style, and so many running movies get running wrong, and they're not really running at top speed and anything. But a documentary, that's such an important part of running history.
I like Pat Porter as Lassevieren, though. I like that. Actually, he did a pretty good job of being a Lassevieren, although, yeah. In one of them, I can't remember which film it was, but I remember Pat talking about it when we chatted.
Yeah, speaking of somebody who would go out in 4:20 at the start of a 6-mile race.
Yeah, I did that more often than not, and people would say, "Why did you do that? You didn't have to do that." I didn't want anyone to think they had any chance.
Yeah. Well, there's a small college runner who I interviewed who wrote a book called Front Runner.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting psyche of people who were aligned with the Prefontaine that you're going to suffer. If you're going to win this race, there will be blood.
Yeah, I was always known for starting fast and putting the hurt to everyone as quickly as I could. It became my thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I go to this camp that's kind of a historic overrun of a historic camp here in Michigan. It used to be called Wolverine Cross Country Camp. That dates back to when I was in high school. I continue to go there as a guest speaker during the summertime, and I bring my memorabilia and I tell some stories, and I do this year after year, but it continues to this day near where I grew up in Reed City, Hersey, Michigan. I'll be back there. People love to look at those pictures and hear the stories.
Yeah.
Thank you,
I should. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I should give you a little update just because you know the guys. Maybe not. Like Pete Lucas, he's become a documentarian of human rights issues in Columbia University. He goes to Brazil with his students every year and makes these films. He's got like PeteLucas.com and documentaries about the culture. And it's really fascinating.
I listened to a little of your interview with him the other day, and I thought, gee, I'd like to chat with Pete. The last time I talked to him, he was working for a company selling and installing mini blinds.
Oh my gosh.
I bought my mini blinds from Pete, and he came, and I remember him trying to convince me to buy the newest color, what was coming out, the new color that would be coming out when they were replacing 1970s colors with a new wave of colors, like, the new colorway was coming in. He said, purple is the color. I said, no way am I going to put purple. Yeah, purple would have been the better choice. Pete, you were right on.
Great. I haven't talked to him since his last trip, and we were in college. I was just like a couple steps behind him my freshman year, and then I got hurt, and then he moved to Division III. He's a really neat guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a really neat guy.
Yeah, a creative soul, creative spirit. Uh, we didn't talk at all about one of the biggest races I ever ran was in Brazil.
Yeah, you won. That's
And
another. Let's talk about that international race in Brazil.
there's this race in Brazil that I don't know how many years it's been run now. When I ran it, it was the 54th year for the race. So it continued right through the World War, and it predates air travel. But international athletes came from all around the world to run in this race that's staged on New Year's Eve. And it's named after the patron saint of New Year's, Saint Silvestre, and it's run in the streets of Sao Paulo, Brazil. And if you look online, you can see who the race winners were. Yeah, Pavo Nurmi won the race. Bibi Bakila, famous marathon runner from Ethiopia, won the race. Emil Putmans, I think, won the race. Frank Schroeder won the race. The list of people who won the race goes on and on. I qualified or earned an invitation to this race because I came second to Alberto Salazar in the National Cross Country Championships. Alberto's chose not to go, so I ended up receiving the invitation. I remember Steve Flanagan helped me. They would use a courier services that they called them then to get a visa in place and to travel to Brazil. I was recovering from a really bad case of bronchitis, and as I was traveling there, and I recovered, but I ran the race. My friend Frank Schroeder guided me to say, be ready to race in the craziest race you've ever run. And Rich Castro convinced me that I should be prepared for unexpected things to happen. And many unexpected things did happen. One of the things was I wore a Brazilian national team singlet that was loaned to me by Rich Castro, who had been a part of coaching exchange groups where he traveled internationally and been to, and so they would trade garments from the Federation. So this had the Federation logo on it. I could tell details of the race, and it's pretty fascinating race experience, but it was where animal midbrain takes over, fight and flight takes over, and you become, I used to imagine myself being a big whitetail buck on the opening day of firearm season. It was a little like that in this race because it was surviving in a place where the conditions were threatening. The people in South America still say, Lindsay, he tricked us. He tricked us. He tricked us. We would not have let him run away from us if we'd known who he was, but we saw that it was a Brazilian that was winning, and there was no Brazilian. There was no Brazilian that was going to run away from us. He would have to come back to us. So, yeah, they still say he tricked us. Yeah. I won the race, but the details are a little scary because, yeah, I could have come home in a box running in front of the lead vehicle loaded with downhill on slippery, wet pavement, oil slick, wet pavement, crowds of people. It's a different race experience. And
it's a great list of names to be a part of. Congratulations. That's really a cool thing.
Prizes were amazing. There were so many people that came out of the streets to run there because they thought they could win the race running barefoot, headed cotton shorts. The first prize was, there were many prizes, but the one prize was a gold medallion that was about that big, the solid gold, made just for the race winner. That was like 5 years of income from that one for a person in Brazil, for that one. I don't have it anymore. When my family was struggling financially, I sold it for scrap and paid the mortgage with it for a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like getting rid of a Super Bowl ring, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
That's what it was. That would be a good comparison. Yeah. Now, I'll hang my memorabilia back on the wall. People that aren't with us anymore, a few people in there, they're gone now.
Yes, people you've talked about that went on. And glad to have time with you and hope your health continues and you can stay outdoors and enjoy the snowshoeing.
There's the date.
There it is. All right.
And
That was an amazing year or two for you. They weren't surprising too many people by 1981. Everybody knew who you were and they weren't going to let you get away unless, at least not on purpose.
it was fun. It was a fun ride there. I was certainly full of myself, as one of my mentors would say. You're just really full of yourself. Be careful.
Yeah, that's interesting what it takes. You talked about the animal mode, midbrain mode, and what we have to do, the zoning, the planning, the mind, and the compartmentalization of who we are and who we become by competition, by interacting with people all over the world. It's you're ideal for this talk, not because of your impact and your success, but because of your reflections and self-awareness and struggles you've had. It's been just a joy, Herb. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Good day.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed another episode. Do you have someone you'd like to hear interviewed on the podcast? You can leave a comment on the YouTube channel or on the website, running70s.com. That's running70s.com. Let me know what you think of the episodes and anyone, including yourself, you'd like to hear interviewed. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.